No, we cannot have an epic B-roll sequence for this thing. Not today. Let me be very clear. In its current state, the 99 Necron is not worth your money. Do not buy one. If you are interested in balisongs, which you should be, I highly suggest either the Crackerakin from Squid Industries, the Volt Pro from Nibali's, which I designed, or if you want something similar to the Necron but better in literally every way, I could not suggest the EPS Wraith more. All three of these are much better than the Necron and cheaper. However, I said in its current state for a reason. The 99 Necron does have the bones of a very good butterfly knife. It's just extremely disappointing on very basic levels. So let's talk about why this knife feels like a massive betrayal to the entire balisong community by the very company that popularized the hobby in the first place, and why its existence might actually be a good thing that marks a large step forward for Benchmade as a whole? Yeah. For balisong flippers and for fans of Benchmade knives in general, this is gonna be a wild ride. Unlike our Patreon, which is totally not a wild ride in any way and is in fact incredibly normal. Each of our Patreon supporters are definitely not part of an elite unit battling an alien superintelligence hell-bent on destroying planet Earth. Instead, they pay us only $3 a month for access to our private community Discord server and get to see videos like these days in advance of you mere mortals. If you'd like to participate in very normal activities with absolutely no government cover-ups, then consider donating. These videos wouldn't happen without your support, so thank you. And to those of you who know, the Red Fox trots quietly at midnight. When Benchmade originally announced the Necron, not only was I surprised, I was flabbergasted. But I think we are going to need some context and history about the company and their releases in general to help you understand what led to this deep feeling of flabbergastation. Benchmade has done a lot for the balisong hobby and EDC knives in general. Anyone even remotely into these everyday carry products or knives of any kind probably knows about Benchmade. Pretty much any knife or survival store in the world will carry some kind of Benchmade product. Their influence is extremely large. When they originally started back in 1979, the name of the company was literally Balisong Inc. And you can see this reflected in their logo today. That logo, as you might notice, is also a butterfly. While there are some examples of people referring to these as butterfly knives before that, the name didn't reach widespread appeal until after Benchmade implemented this logo. Nowadays, people know these more as butterfly knives than the original name of balisong. The impact Benchmade has had on the hobby cannot be overstated. Their releases over the years, starting all the way back in the 80s with their very first balisong designed by the legendary knife maker Jody Sampson, have shaped the way modern balisongs function to this day. They have made massive innovations in the market, such as the introduction of the Zen pin system, which almost every modern balisong now uses. Their 4X series of titanium channel balisongs can be directly attributed to the existence of this very hobby as it is today. Original Filipino balisongs were not designed for modern flipping. The original martial art based around the knife does have some impressive moves, but the function of these early examples was severely limited by their construction. The Benchmade 42 and 47 models, by contrast, are some of the first examples of flippable balisongs. It was the very first time that something was widely available with a pleasant balance and free swinging handles. The advent of these knives changed everything, finally allowing people to begin creating and sharing tricks with one another in what would eventually become the modern balisong community. That's right, this community literally would not exist, at least in the way it does, without Benchmade. Unfortunately, their releases after the 4X series marked a slow decline in both quality and features that flippers actually wanted. The Benchmade 51, for example, was not considered a very good balisong, and literally the second balisong video I ever made was about how you shouldn't buy one. Though it did have a major impact in stimulating the modding side of the balisong community as a platform. The 6X series was a terrible failure with handles made of solid steel that flipped horribly, though it did also receive a good bit of modding support. And the 87 was so exciting, being the first time that they had released a titanium channel balisong in years, if it wasn't an oversized hot mess with a bad balance on bearings. This slow decline was so sad to watch, with Benchmade finally throwing in the towel in 2020 by discontinuing their last Balisong, the 85. The company, who had started by making butterfly knives all the way back in 1979, now didn't carry a single model. And that is a massive problem for the Balisong community as a whole. Benchmade is one of the most recognizable knife brands today with mass market appeal, and them not having any representation of butterfly knives in general is objectively bad for our community's reach. That is, until 4 years later, with the release of the 99 Necron.
Damn.
All right, normally this is where we would talk about the specifications of the Necron, but there's a problem. You see, the specs of this Balisong and my feelings on it are deeply intertwined. In fact, I think the rest of the community feels this way too, but I have an even more personal, secret connection to this Balisong. I have never been able to talk about this before, but I have been under NDA for years about my involvement with an early prototype of the Necron, before it was even called that. Now, to be clear, I have recently received permission from Benchmade to talk about this to a certain degree, but I have had to be extremely hush-hush about this for a long time. Sometime around 4 years ago, Benchmade sent me early versions of what would eventually become this knife. I gave them my feedback, which included producing a video that only a small handful of people have ever seen. Went on a couple calls with the designers and then never heard from them again. That's right, I was ghosted by Benchmade. So imagine my shock 4 years later when this was announced and included some, but not all of my feedback. Surprise! I have a personal vendetta. So let's talk about those specs, shall we? To start, it has an S30V clip point blade. This is a good steel, though S35VN is slightly better for Balisongs due to its durability. S30 can chip easier. I do really like the blade shape itself, though. I think it's actually really cool. It's got Zen pins, which is great to see. It is latchless, which is super cool and surprising. The handle extensions are dope, and it's sandwich G10 with titanium liners, which is great. Oh. It's got stainless steel liners? Oh God, it cost $550? You can get most titanium Balisongs for far less than that. Huh. Well, at least the bushings are well tuned. Sorry to break it to you, but yeah, this Balisong costs more than $half grand with stainless steel liners and no bushings. This is a sandwich construction Balisong on washers only. You wanna know one of the main things I told them 4 years ago? Put it on bushings! That's right, it's been 4 years since I gave my feedback on the early proto, was ghosted, and then this released. I didn't even think it was going to be released at all by this point, much less in a state like this. But then I looked closer, and I realized that some of my feedback was taken into account. There was a feature on the original prototype that literally ruined the flipping experience by making it extremely uncomfortable. I told them to remove this feature, and they did. But maybe they did that part on their own. Maybe it wasn't my direct feedback that, oh my God, the liners. The original proto I tried had different liners with a much more boring design that was perhaps related to the diamond motif found on the G10. I thought this was a bit silly and directly suggested that they used the old 4X series hole pattern in the design. Here, I'm gonna play the audio from my video 4 years ago, even though I can't actually show you the visuals.
On terms of the design, I think that this is relatively good so far, but I would really like to see a return of the original styled Benchmade hole pattern with maybe an echo of that pattern somehow. Could set it apart from the current, market offerings.
Upon realizing this, I became quite frustrated. Sure, it may have been a coincidence, and maybe somebody else at Benchmade came up with the exact idea that I had given them years ago, but I still felt very upset that it seemed like they took some of my advice but ignored the most important parts and then ghosted me. I mean, to be fair, the people I was in contact with did leave Benchmade a few months later, but still. So now, perhaps you understand my feelings slightly better. Remember, flabbergastation. Benchmade could have done better. They are an important part of the balisong hobby from a historical perspective. Them releasing a knife with bad specifications like this is harmful to the hobby at large. Imagine the people who know nothing of modern butterfly knives picking this thing up because it's a Benchmade product, only to be turned away because they wasted their money on a bad-feeling blade rub machine. To some degree, this feels like a betrayal against the very community they helped to start in the first place. Their marketing for this product makes a point to say that they were listening to the flipping community and implementing modern features that flippers want. Look at this, inside the box, on the lid, it says, Balisong. We continue the Balisong tradition of combining modern technology with classic design to produce the finest butterfly knives in the world. I really wish that were true. So where do we go from here? Well, we have a lot of places to go from here. First of all, the price is insane for what they're offering. The specs are genuinely terrible, and the design of the G10 is far too plain. The cross pattern on it is weird because it has terrible flaky machining on literally every model I've seen, and the body screws on it are T6, which is a horrible choice, and the warranty doesn't even allow you to adjust the pivots. Also, the trainer version they sent me came with a bent blade, which is an issue other people have had, which results in permanent blade rub. This trainer costs $400. It should not come with a bent blade. Sorry, I am getting way too worked up and spiraling into a really negative place, so I think I need some time to think and collect myself. I think I should go visit the guru.
Ah, young William, what seems to be troubling you, my boy?
I don't know, we're doing a review of a knife and I feel like I'm just being really negative about it.
When in peril, one must take a step back and find their center. What knife seems to be troubling you?
It's the 99 Necron from Benchmade.
Oh, that thing sucks. You really thought I was just gonna sit by and let Will do all the talking? No. It's time for me to unleash what Ethan over on the Blade Bias channel called my Thunder. My journey with the 99 Necron started at the same time as Will's, since I also had to sign an NDA to try that early prototype, and I gave my feedback on it as well. Will has a lot more history with Benchmade than I do, but even I have always known them as a respectable knife company. But my peak engagement with this hobby has been at a time where Benchmade hasn't been actively making balisongs at all. So I come at the Necron with a pretty fresh and positive perspective. I want Benchmade to make something that's great and decently affordable, to make an impact on this hobby that I love so much. So when the Necron was officially announced, and of course I went on the same journey that Will did of, wait, what? What the hell? That's totally the thing we tried the prototype of several years ago. I made a deal with Ethan during the Blade Bias podcast that we wouldn't touch it until we were at Blade Show 2024 together at the Benchmade booth. If you want to watch that whole experience, we made an hour-long podcast style video about it right here. My first impression was just okay. At least once I got one that didn't have the heaviest weight configuration they had, which legitimately made me feel insecure about my flipping. You could see it in the footage. I hurt. It sucked. I'm still scarred by that experience. So we recorded our impressions, we cut the cameras, and then one of the head Benchmade marketing people, who Will had already communicated with about review units, and he slid me 2 live blade red G10 Necrons. We did not pay for these. These are review units, as is the trainer one. Don't buy this. He said he was going to send them to us anyway for review, so we might as well take them here. And I wasn't gonna complain. I guess my badge that said Brandon Baker, Will Hirsch indicated that I had something to do with either Brandon Baker, or Will Hirsch. All separate people, by the way, for now. That marketing person watched Ethan and I's entire reaction to it and heard everything we said. And we actually ended up having a pretty positive conversation about how they're listening to feedback, they hear all the complaints, and they want to do better. He even said that the Necron represented an opening silo of new Balisong products from them. And we left with a genuine hope that they were listening, they would keep listening, and do better in the future. Then, oh my God, then I unboxed the Necron and my entire universe shattered. Can you imagine paying $500+ for a Balisong with a modular weight system and alternate spacers, where the alternate spacers are at the very front of the package? And when you go to try to swap those spacers, you discover that not only are the body screws T6, which is code word for very tiny and fragile, but they are, and I shit you not, thread locked. The T6 screws are thread locked very tightly. And to properly mod the weight with the included tungsten weights and replace the spacers, which I remind you are at the very front of the package, you must remove 10 thread locked T6 screws. Pretty much every modern Balisong these days uses at least T8 screws. T6 are very small and incredibly easy to strip, especially when they're thread locked. For comparison, the pivot screws on the Necron are T10, which is one of the things they got right. Even Brandon clones like me use at least T8 screws across all of our models. See how easy that was? And you might only see 4 T6 body screws on each handle, but don't worry, it gets better. There's a hidden screw under the scales that holds in the spacer. So you might think that might cause some problems in taking it apart. Yeah, oh boy did I try to get this apart. Using a brand new bit with tons of downward pressure, I couldn't get half of these screws out without stripping them to some degree. There's footage of me recorded by Rob Heath at the pit during Blade Show right after I had received these of me trying to take it apart, and I just lose my mind the whole time. And you might think, well, Brandon, you just suck at this. I do at some things, but not this. Almost everyone I've talked to has had the same experience disassembling the Necron as I have, including Zippy Balisong, who makes 3D printed mods like this for Balisongs and has to take them apart and put them back together for a living. And even he, Zippy Crockett himself, couldn't successfully get this apart without risking stripping the screws and had to buy specific hardware to take it apart. So amidst not being able to mod the thing, I thought, okay, I'll just tune it up as best as I can and let it be as is. Maybe I can send it to Benchmade and have them fix it up for me. Nope. On this modular Balisong, the included warranty card states, amidst other things, do not disassemble your knife. Any of these acts will void this warranty. What? I can't disassemble the modular knife, or in order to mod the knife, I have to disassemble it? And here's the best part. Guess which screws aren't thread locked? Take a wild guess. Any one of them. It's the pivot screws. The pivot screws on the washer Balisong aren't thread locked. It's like they built a Balisong like you would build a folding knife, where you don't have to worry about having to constantly tighten and untighten the screws to get proper tolerances. Which is like cooking a steak the same way you'd cook a chicken. Yeah, you'd get something that's cooked, but it won't be a good tasting steak. If it had bushings, very little of this would be a problem, because well-tuned bushings allow you to fully crank down on the screws and still have good handle swing. But the Necron only has washers, so all of this is a huge problem. And I'm not complaining about this because, oh, I need it to sound perfect and I need to have it to have no handle play whatsoever. No, a bad tune is actually dangerous. I got 2 cuts on this finger in the same week because of the bad tune on both of the Necrons that we have. This happened because I was trying to do a standard open, flip it open like I normally would, which at this point, you'd grab the handle like this and keep doing the trick. But when the blade doesn't move after you flick open the handle and then you grab, oh dear, oh goodness my oh me, that's a bloody Brandon. This could happen to anybody. This wasn't because I tuned it poorly. That's how it was out of the box. And because the tolerances are so loose, it just randomly will decide, I'm not gonna flip today. And that could seriously hurt you. Products from pretty much every mainstream balisong company have all the features and considerations we're asking for here and then some, and cost hundreds of dollars less. In this configuration, the Necron is $550 with a decent blade, steel liners, and G10 on washers. The EPS Wraith has a decent blade, titanium liners, G10, and bushing pivots, and costs $280. It's much harder to get a hold of, but the pricing is still relevant. They got so much right on paper here, but they took so many missteps that caused so many problems on the consumer end. I love this hobby, and I respect so much of the time and the effort and the resources and manpower that it takes to produce these. But the basic fundamentals being so close to greatness while also completely missing the mark is baffling. As Will said, flabbergastation. And while that may be consistent with Benchmade's history as a company, it's not consistent with the rest of the hobby, what people expect, and what they deserve. So the ball's in your court, Benchmade. Meanwhile, my balls are going back to being Guru Brandon. Ooh, empty your mind of everything but fine dining and breathing.
Okay. I took some time to explore my thoughts on a deeper level, and I think I've found something. Let's talk about flipping. Yahoo! Here's the thing, for all of its flaws, the 99 Necron is actually a pretty good flipper, sometimes. Unfortunately, it is not consistently a good flipper due to the tune on the washers being so wacky. Sometimes a handle can get stuck, and because this knife comes razor sharp out of the box, it can be dangerous. As Brandon talked about earlier, he got cut twice in the same way because of this exact issue. However, overall, the flipping performance is genuinely pretty good. It can do basically everything I want it to, which is impressive. But we wouldn't say that any of those features are a good reason to buy the Necron. It is still very overpriced. But the fact that it is good at flipping at all means they did do something right. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. The community consensus in general seems to be that the Necron is a good flipper with disappointing specs, baffling construction, and a bad price. Some people even love the Necron actually, with Hey Austin being a great example, and you can check out his review of this knife on Instagram at the links below. He is quite good at flipping the Necron and was actually featured on some of the B-roll in this video. Realizing all of this got me feeling hopeful somehow? When you look past the feelings of disappointment and betrayal and instead focus in on the details, there is something going on here. Like, first of all, it actually has a really nice balance out of the box, which you can't really say about any other Benchmade balisong released in the past decade. On top of that, the handles have a tapered design. They are thinner near the pivots and thicker at the base, which is an incredibly modern feature and a pretty small detail. It's also a modern size. Whoa. You can decide now if you want it long like most flippers or short like the original 51 with the interchangeable spacers. The adjustable balance is neat for sure, but there is one big detail that really stands out to me. It is latchless. I don't know if people understand just how big of a deal that is for Benchmade. They are a mainstream knife company, and that comes with a lot of expectations. A big one being safety through functionality, meaning a latch mechanism. They have been finding creative ways to include latches on their balisongs for decades at this point, so it's kind of crazy that they just didn't here. They actually listened to community consensus and decided to release something without a latch, which is genuinely shocking from a large company like Benchmade. The problem with this balisong is that they kind of put the cart before the horse. It does genuinely include features that the community wanted. It just fails on such a fundamental level of specification. If Benchmade can learn from this, great things could happen. Imagine them simply updating this design to include bushings. It would be 10 times better immediately and actually be a proper representation of what balisong flipping can be. And here's the thing, I know that they can learn. This balisong is quite literally proof of that. This is, unfortunately, the best flipping balisong Benchmade has ever released. I know that's a controversial statement, but I believe that it's true. Sure, the 4X series was good back in the day, but those don't even come close to the performance of modern flippers. The 99 Necron, however, does, out of the box. It's just missing basic features that it should have had.
Holy shit.
So, I really do hope that Benchmade learns from this, either by releasing something new or, preferably, by updating the existing Necron to match community expectations. They have gotten plenty of feedback by this point. I hope that they use it. Benchmade is incredibly important to our community, and I genuinely hope that they are able to turn this around into something better for everyone involved. Speaking of everyone involved, EDC knife people, those of you not in the balisong community, if you're still watching this, what do you think of the Necron? From my balisong focus perspective, obviously the community has a strong opinion on it, but if you're watching this video as just a fan of EDC gear in general, does this seem like a good value to you? Does it seem like a bad value? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. I do really want to thank Benchmade for being brave and giving us these Necrons for review. While we were not necessarily kind to them, they do still get me excited for what Benchmade might do in the future. As the marketing person said, this is potentially an opening silo for Benchmade to make more balisongs, which would be awesome.
If they're good.
If they're good. Thanks, Brandon. Good point. I also want to extend a massive thank you to our wonderful Patreon supporters. Your contributions help to make each and every one of these videos possible. This one in particular was a huge undertaking with one of the most intense script writing processes we've ever gone through for a video on this channel. That effort is absolutely worth it when we get to release a video like this for all of you. Each and every one of you, even at our very lowest tier, supports us more than 1,000 views on one of these videos. So thank you. If you'd like to join our incredible community and get access to videos like these or talk to Brandon and I on the private community Discord server, please consider donating. Tiers start at just $3 a month, and every dollar gets nailed to my walls until I have enough to cover the entire house. I want to extend a special thank you to VIP patrons Turbo Flip Dad and Saturn for their direct and substantial support of the channel. But that's pretty much it for the moment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go find the guru again, because I think he stole my wallet.
Taco boy.